I'm from a small town, the kind where you're in the same classes with the same kids from preschool to graduation. I was never popular and had my fair share of bullies, but never as bad as one kid in my class. Max. He was on the shorter side, had these little round glasses with his hair slicked to the side like he was right out of a movie cast as a stereotypical nerd. He kept to himself and didn't really interact with others if he could avoid it. Fast forward to 8th grade, when we were paired as lab partners and had to sit at the same table together every day for the entire year. I considered myself a nice person and always went out of my way to make sure I wasn't rude to people, especially people who hadn't done anything to deserve it. So of course I was friendly and happy to be his partner as long as he did his fair share of work. The year came and went. He was shy but polite. We got along fine being partners. Ninth grade started and I had a lot of trouble at home with my birth father, so I chose to move in with my mother a few towns over. I was only about 30 minutes away, but I had to start a completely new school a few months into my freshman year, and it was scary. I may not have been popular at my last school, but I did have several friends whom I loved and missed dearly. My mom would often drive me to the other town to see my friends and hang out, and I also started making new friends in my new school. It was a good setup. I continued this way until I was 16 and could drive myself. I never heard anything from Max, and honestly I kind of forgot about him. That was until my junior year of high school. I started casually seeing this other guy, Jack, from my hometown, and he asked me to go to prom with him. I was excited and happy to say yes, as I get to spend the night with him and my friends from childhood. A couple of months before prom, my mother told me there was a new lady at her job. She was asking about me because her grandson was seeing me, and she wanted a picture so she could put a face to my name. My mother knew Jack and knew this wasn't his grandmother, so she asked his name, and wouldn't you know it, it was Max. My mother showed her a picture of me she had on her desk, and the lady went on her way. A few weeks later, she asked for the color of my prom dress, so that she knew what to get Max so we could match. My mother was confused and told her it was pink. About 2 weeks before prom, some of my friends from my hometown told me that Max had been telling people that we were going to the dance together, and that he was so excited. I thought this was creepy, but I didn't put too much thought into it. The night of prom, I picked Jack up and we headed over to the school only to find Max and his grandmother waiting outside the entrance so that she could take pictures of us before we go in. I was not one to disappoint people, so I politely took a couple of pictures with him as my actual date stood off to the side and waited. If Max's grandmother was confused that I had another date, she didn't show it. The rest of the night went smoothly and Jack and I had a great time. We didn't see Max anymore and assumed he left. Other than his grandmother telling my mom that he lost my number and tried to get it for him, which she thankfully didn't do, I didn't hear much from him after we graduated. I went to a state college, and I had heard he'd gotten into a well-respected private university. Everything was fine for the first weeks of college, and then I ran into him. He caught me on the way to class one day. I was polite and asked him if he was a student here too, which he was, and I chatted with him for a minute before hurrying off to class. It was a relatively harmless interaction, but it still creeped me out a bit since I knew he got into the other school and wondered why he chose to go to a state college. For the next few months, I ran into him almost daily. He always wanted to talk and never seemed to be with anyone else. I found out from some girls in my dorm that he had been hanging around asking about me and tried to figure out what my class schedule and where I would be and when. He also told them he was my boyfriend, and he passed up a scholarship to another college to come here and be with me instead. They figured out he was lying when they never saw us together for long periods or him up in the rooms with me, and stopped answering his questions. I left at the end of the semester to move home and take classes at a nearby school. I didn't tell him, obviously. The following year, I got married to my boyfriend from senior year of high school. Dumb, I know. Anyway, we were in this small town, which is in the same country as my hometown. For a fair shortly after the wedding, while walking around and enjoying ourselves, I see Max staring at us at the end of the block. It was the first time I had been genuinely fearful of him, as the look on his face was nothing but short of hatred. I tried to ignore him and went about my night, seeing him a few more times, always with that look on his face. The next few years passed, with me hearing nothing from him at all. I didn't even know if he still lived in the area or not. I found out a little while after that he did when I started working at a clothes store in town. He would stop in and sit in that dad chair next to the door for all the guys to hang out while other people were shopping. I mentioned it to my manager because our history and the fact that he would stare at me constantly while sitting there, but he always came in with a girl. I later found out it was his sister, so they didn't think much of it. He never spoke to me, just stared. When I was in my mid-20s, I moved to a city in my home state, but still several hours away from my hometown. I am 30 now and doing well in life. Other than a random Facebook friend request, which I rejected, I haven't heard from him, and I hope it stays that way. So at this time, I'm 14 years old and I'm enrolled in high school. My mom worked at a nearby apartment complex as a manager, so she'd pick me up from school at 2:40 and bring me home instead of riding the bus for hours. The day is completely normal so far. She picks me up from school and brings me home. Not more than 10 minutes after I'm home, a black car pulls up in the driveway and I hear a hard knock on the door. I look through the glass on the front door and I can clearly see a man wearing a hoodie in the summer, laying on the ground in front of my door. I guess he assumed he was completely obscured because my mom had a wreath on the door and the space between the window and the bottom of the door was wide enough that so someone could possibly assume I couldn't see them. Well, I saw him. I ran and grabbed the house phone and called the police from the kitchen where I could see the car. I had a machete and waited around the corner of the door while still on the phone with the police. At this point, the man knocks again, so I took matters to my own hands. I yell as loud as I can, "Leave now or I'll kill you!" I had a pretty deep voice in my age, so I guess he thought I was a fully grown man, because this man got up and ran off like an Olympic sprinter. So, about 3 minutes or so pass and the police get to my house. We had no cameras or anything, so there's really nothing to go off to pursue this person. The cops pretty much just tell me how I handled the situation well, and the laws about self-defense. The man never returns, and that's the end of my story. I looked back on this a lot over the years, and this man almost certainly wanted to rob us. What's most creepy about this to me is how he most likely scoped us out, saw that we were just a teenage boy and a single mother, went through the trouble to learn our routines, and waited for what he thought was the ideal moment to rob us. We bought a handgun because of this, so I never really lost any sleep over this because I knew if he came back, I had a surprise for him too. So I used to live in southeast London, and I went to a very terrible secondary school. I just finished my day, and I was waiting for my bus. I sit on the seat halfway on the left side of the bus, and I'm peaceful and minding my own business. It's a bright sunny day, and the bus is quite packed, and everybody looks so disconnected and lost in themselves, myself included. I'm in my own world. Suddenly, this fat white guy who is ghetto walks in. It looks like he's by himself, casually walking towards my side, and I have my back on the opposite seat to indicate basically, don't be sitting there. He sits on that seat rather promptly, and me being me, totally ignorant and unaware, just sorta don't pay attention to him. Suddenly, his hand goes into my pocket, and he pulls my iPod into his pocket so swiftly. Again, I don't understand my mentality here. I'm so blissfully unaware. I put my iPod back into my pocket so innocently, and then the situation takes a turn for the worse. A guy frantically from the seat behind me appears, and he has a hold of my hood of the coat, and he looks just absolutely evil. He is mixed race, and his eyes look completely black. I'm guessing he's a mix of English and Irish. He is batshit unstable, and is threatening to stab me. And the robbery is happening in front of lots of ignorant and indifferent selfish Londoners. Why nobody said anything is beyond me. All I remember is a black lady looking at me with big round scared looking eyes, but does and says nothing. The guy behind me is doing all the talking. I wasn't even previously aware of this guy. There were also two at the back monitoring the situation. I actually am calm in this situation. He wants a phone from me. I tell him I don't have a phone, and he keeps demanding. And the guy beside him tells him to calm down, but is whispering. The guy behind me is then saying, "Don't get off the bus or you'll get stabbed if you do." He then is demanding money, and I say I don't have much. I give him a few pounds. He's still so incredibly unstable, crazy and all over the place. Seems like a heroin addict or something, whilst the other guy acts like some kind of convert operation. I miss my stop, and I am scared to get off understandably. I get off the next stop. Before I do, I turn around. And this is in front of lots of people. I don't understand what everyone else was doing. I say, "Give me my iPod back," I plead, and I don't understand how the bus driver hearing what I said doesn't give anything. I shout it again. This ghetto white guy who was beside me says, "Get off the bus!" The guy in the back suddenly seems non-existent. I stumble out of the bus. I just run home crying. My dad comforts me and we go to find him, but we don't succeed. This is something that caused significant mental and emotional damage to me in my life. I developed agoraphobia afterwards and struggled to leave the house for a few months. I became resentful, fearful, and mistrusted people. I had severe anxiety issues and still to this day, I'm even crying now writing it.